When I'm using my computer, I really want to feel in control of my attention and intentional about what I'm doing and have the computer support that. So I've been thinking about sort of mechanisms for that and just trying to kind of get everything out on the table and think about how they do or could relate. Because there's interesting categories of things as you get into like tasks and how those relate to time on a calendar. So partly I'm just trying to get the idea and shape of all that. So there's to-dos that are just a simplest form, a list of tasks. I have one set up here that's just a flat list. Move you can do is go hierarchical or have per projects to-dos that get rolled up, which I think makes sense in a lot of times, but also gets complex fast. So I'm still thinking about how I want to implement that here. One thing about having control of my desktop is I have the active to-do up here in my bar, and I think that's a really nice, like, the system is supporting me and also feeling like I have control over the system, because you don't always get to like really mess with the bar, which I do here because this is Linux, and you can do whatever. Reminders can be to-dos. I think probably should be to-dos, so they just come on your list at the time they're relevant. But that is introducing like time here, and probably for them to be effective, you probably want a due date, because you don't want them to get added. I can imagine them being automatically added, but then if they get lost behind the rest of your list, it's not really doing the right thing. But that, of course, adds like, then do all my to-dos need a due date? Because that's kind of a then instead of just writing down a to-do fast, I have to make that decision. I think they can probably have an optional to-do date. Really, right now I have like reminders in a separate calendar, and I'll probably worry about them more later. But so that's kind of time like coming into to-dos, and then the most time-based thing maybe is like a calendar with events. And that seems real and needed, especially because that's often how you are interacting with other people, that you have scheduled meetings. And so I think for my system, for now I'm just having a calendar kind of live outside of this that has that stuff. But ultimately, like, to feel like it's all part of one system, I would either maybe do an app that does an interface that fits in with everything else on top of my Google Calendar, or does some sort of import, or like moves the system over entirely. Time blocks, I think, are an interesting part of this. I think they can be really useful for managing focus. I also have a set of those up here. So I write down time blocks for the day, and then I get those along with the progress bar. And in some ways, especially when I'm doing kind of like stuff that doesn't have an external deadline, that seems most useful. And they seem good. And then you get some questions about how should they match up with to-dos. Right now, like, these are kind of redundant to-dos and time blocks, and I feel like redundancy is better than overcomplicating it. But could you attach to-dos to a time block? But often I feel like you want like a admin, like, catch-up time block that actually has a bunch of to-dos. But now I'm thinking about, like, do you attach to-dos to a time block, or do you kind of leave that informal? Routines, are those somewhere in the middle? That's something I'm thinking about. Something I thought about when I was working at the Daylight, the tablet that's really focused on respecting your attention. We talked a lot about like having a morning routine, and especially an interesting category is I want to read, like 2 long form articles in the morning, because that like jump starts my brain and I feel better after doing that. And that's kind of that's a routine that's scheduled every day. It's kind of a time block, but it's more like item based on reading those two things. I put like progress here. You can also imagine like I want to read like 50 pages of a book. And it's interesting to think about what a timer gets you, and that could be a countdown timer. So I want to spend 20 minutes reading a book. Is that a better way to do that? Because it fits more in with the rest of your schedule, or is it, I guess if you don't have it as a timer and it's more like I want to read like 2 articles today, then maybe you gotta choose those to fit, and the timer is like 1 of 2 completed. I guess that's, yeah, there's kind of a task progress interface that is like, especially if you had subtasks, you could do it like 1 of 5, 2 of 5. So that's kind of another way to think about progress. And then things I've played with is, yeah, like a countdown timer, which also the like progress of a time block is like that. And then there's also elapsed time I played with a lot, because sometimes you're like, oh, it's better just to know what I'm spending time on, and that's a step towards then understanding what I can do. So like entering into a workspace. Something else to play with here is like these spaces. So I have a bunch of spaces that are just different desktop workspaces, where I can organize things. And I've played before with, oh, should I have the timer tied to the space? Should I lock myself into a space to do that? And I guess that goes a lot towards assembling context. So space allows you to assemble your like browser windows or different documents in a certain space, and that can be good, yeah, for focus, being locked in there. It can also be good for being able to switch out of that and come back and have it right there. And I think there's interesting connections to like how we work in physical spaces, and I think a lot of what I'm thinking about is how to bring in some of those feelings of physical spaces, of sitting down to a desk, having the books you want, having the documents you want, having that all work together. But those are some of the pieces I'm thinking about, and I'm sure we'll continue to think about.